Hi guys, in this video we're going to build a simple application using the map perspective component. So the inspiration for this little project came from a forum post. Here, I believe this legend is in the Discord chat, by the way. So if you want to talk with him and other legends like me, join the Discord. Link is in the description. But he posted a question basically if you can search for locations for a map in a map and then fly to that location, which is a common application of a map. Like Google Maps, you can search for certain places and then go to those places and actually see them on the map. And then Jonathan here replied, and he pretty much, this is what I followed. So I even created the UI the same way with one little caveat. I don't have the here functionality, and I'll explain why here in a second. But we will use this Nominatim API to search for places, to get the latitude and longitude of certain places, and then fly to that location on the map. You'll see what I mean here in a second. Let me give you a quick demo. So for example, I can put in Seattle, Washington, hit search, and then the options for the drop-down will be populated, and then I can click Seattle and we will fly to Seattle. I can search for New York and we'll have our options populated, and then I can fly to New York. Oops, wrong New York. Somewhere in the UK, apparently there's a New York. But anyway, that's the basic functionality. So I mentioned the API that we will be using, and let me show you the documentation here. If you just Google Nominatim, I don't know how to pronounce that, but that's what I Googled, API, and then went to the search part here. The actual URL, as you'll see later in the video, we're going to use comes from right here. So everything you're going to need will be shown in this video to build the sample little map application, as you saw in the demo a few seconds ago. The reason why we won't build the here checkbox is because if you're not on a mobile device with location services enabled, that will return funky coordinates. It's not going, or it might not even return anything. Let me show you where it comes from. So if you go to your project properties, and you go to geolocation here, and then we see our latitude and longitude here. They're not filled out. We could bind this to a label and see what we actually get, but it's not going to be accurate if we're on a desktop device or a device that doesn't have location services enabled. So that is why I just left that feature out. It would be pretty easy to add. You just bind to these properties, latitude and longitude, if you wanted to add that to your map. But we're going to stick to the simple map example. So you type in a search field, you hit search, it sends an HTTP request and then populates our options. And then when you hit an option, we'll fly to that location on the map. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. I forgot to open the designer. I'll do that now. So whatever designer you're using, go ahead and open that. That is the first step to most Ignition projects. Okay, and then I'm going to open a project, or you can create a new one. It's up to you, however you want to organize your projects. Okay, let me create a new folder, call it map, new view, call it search map, make it a flex container type, and let's set a URL to map. Okay, there we go. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to drag on a label. You'll see why. and then I want to drag on a row, and then I'll put in a drop down. And then the actual map component. Okay, now that we have these components, I'm going to play with this label later. Let me look at the view. So this is what we're going to try to model. We want a search bar, a text field where we can type in the city we're searching for, a search button that'll run the actual HTTP request, a drop down with the options, and then the map component. I'm going to add one more component, which is the label. That way we can see our latitude and longitude whenever we click on the map. That's just for debugging. Also, just so you know, there is a better way to implement this sort of search feature. As Carl here says above, you can create a view that has the search functionality and then embed it directly into your map. So it'll look like Google Maps, where it's just a hovering little box in the corner that's overlaid over your map. Or you can do it this way. Also, there's a lot of improvements that can be made. You'll see by the end what I mean. But this is just the bare minimum, just so in case Abdullah, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, or anybody else in the forums wants to see how one way to implement this sort of feature that Jonathan here posted. Okay, so this we will do later. On this row, let's drag on a text field and a button. That'll be the last component. I'm going to set the text box to grow. I'm just going to do some formatting. That way it doesn't look so funky. Make that smaller. Also add padding. Okay, padding. Come on, get out of the way. That is very annoying. Okay, so padding will be 5 pixels. Let's see what that looks like. Okay, that's already better. Let's add some margin on the button. Left pixels. Let's add padding. Here on this component on the drop down, so we can say, or margin actually, margin. We can say 0, and so up and down will be 0, left and right we can say 5 pixels. And then the map we'll set to fill the rest of the container, so make that grow. And then for the map, since our margin on the drop down is 0, we can set the map padding just to 5 or whatever else we want, or margin in this case. 5 pixels. What I should have done is probably just set a padding on the root container instead of setting. Anyway, that's not important. So might as well finish this off. Let's set here a margin left of 5 pixels. So the next thing we're going to do is configure this label. Whenever we click on the map, we can get the latitude and longitude of the map. This will be helpful in making sure that the functionality of the map works correctly. I've done this before. I forgot how I did it in the other example, but this way I'm going to just add an event on map click. Let me add a script event here, and let me select my label, props text, and set it to latitude plus event.lat plus longitude plus event.lng. Okay, and so whenever I click, oh, string, this should fix it. Oh, okay, so whenever I click on the map, it should give me my latitude and longitude coordinates. That'll help us in the long run. Okay, let's take a look back at the forum. So Jonathan here mentions this API, Nominatim. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, but I Googled this API here. I haven't used it before, but it seems pretty easy to use. We're going to use the search feature, basically just to get the latitude and longitude of a place that we search up. So if you go to search queries, there are a few different ways to search. Let me find the one that I used before. So you can search by address details, or you could search by a query. So this will be generic. It might be slower if you're searching for a common name. What's a common name? Like New York, I don't know. Maybe it'll bring back a lot of results. So let's go ahead and copy this endpoint or URL. I'm going to use the Postman API testing tool just to make sure the request works and I understand it before we actually implement an HTTP client in the script. So I'm going to open a new request here, set it to a get HTTP method, paste the URL in here, and you can see that Postman extracts these two query params, Q, which is the query, and format, which is the return format. Let's go ahead and click send. You shouldn't need any authentication or anything like that, so it should be easy there. And it looks like it returns a display name. So this is what we would display in the dropdown, and it returns here what looks like latitude and longitude or coordinates here. Let's try a different search. Let's try to search for New York. New York. And we can see that it returns more than one place. So there's New York, United States. I'm assuming that is referring to the state. And then there's also New York in England, in Missouri. So as you can see, there are different places that have New York in the name. So that's what I was referring to. Okay. So we understand how it works. We have our basic properties. We have the display name here, which will go in the drop down, and we have the coordinates, which we will use to fly to that location. So whenever an item in the drop down is clicked, the map will actually zoom to that location, or use a built-in map function here. So we see fly to. And we can fly to that location or fly to bounds using corners. This translates pretty nicely with this, I'm assuming. Okay, let's get started. Enough talking. So when we hit our button here, as you saw in the beginning, the UI is not the best, but I think it's more important to actually have the functionality. There are a few tricky components to this, so I thought it would be important, or it might be useful to someone, to show you how to actually implement the HTTP client, search, and fly to that location on the map, and some other things. So You could make it a lot better with using an embedded view. So like these form controls or the zoom controls, you could add a view that you search directly in the map. There are a lot of ways to improve it, but we're going to just have the basic functionality. So hopefully this will still be useful to someone. Let's add an on action performed. Oops, I always do this. Let's add a script. Okay, what do we want to happen when we hit the button? Well, when we hit the button, we want to target that URL, use an HTTP GET and retrieve the results. And then we want to set those results, the display name and the latitude and longitude. And we want to set it to this drop down here. And then when those options are clicked, we want the map to fly to that to that location, as you saw there in the intro. Excuse me. Okay, so first thing we want to do is create an HTTP client. System.net.http client. Okay, the second thing we want to do is specify our URL. URL is equal to that URL we pasted. I'll expand this, that way you can see. So this I got from the API's documentation. So JSON, I'll leave this link in the description. We're going to change this up anyway, so you don't need to worry about getting this right, or as I have it at this point. We also want our text. This will come from our text field. So let's go ahead and bind that to the text property here. We're going to insert it into this here. So insert it as part of our query. Let's actually do that now. Plus text plus, as you'll see, this will not always work. We should have some sort of input validation. We will here shortly. Well, we're just trying to get the minimum functionality working right now. So, okay, let's get the resources from that URL, and then check if res.good, if it was successful. I want to system.perspective.print string the response. Okay. Oh, the response.json. So the response will just return a response object. That .json will return the actual objects how we want it. So in the format we want it. Okay, let's hit OK there. Let's save. Let's actually open. I'm not sure why I didn't open a session yet. Agree and close. I believe I called it map. Okay, let's search for New York or Atlanta. Let's hit search. Nothing happens in the user interface, but as we can see, I don't know what's wrong with me. Okay, as you can see in the console, we have our JSON object, and there are a lot of different options. So I see Atlanta, Indiana, as well as the one we were expecting, Atlanta, Georgia. Okay, what if I type in something like New York? If we hit search here, nothing happens. Let's do this in the designer, and so that way we can get an error message. So if we type in New York and hit search, we should get an error here. And there's an illegal character in the query at index 48. The illegal character, of course, is the space. You can't have spaces. The reason why it worked in Postman is because Postman inserted basically URL encoded whatever was inserted into the URL here. It did it on the back end, we didn't see. So that's why New York worked with a space here while it doesn't work in the designer. So one way to fix this, I think the best way to fix this actually would be to use a library. So let's go ahead and import URL lib. And then inside that library, there's a function called urllib.quote plus. This will URL encode this string. Basically, the spaces turn into pluses. If there's an ampersand, that will be URL encoded. A question mark, I think, also will be. Okay, let's run this again. Save. Let's go back into our session. And we should be able to do searches like this. In the documentation also, you'll see I saw this stipulation here. So basically if you use a comma, the query will be faster. Structured result requests are faster. Commas are optional, but improve performance by reducing the complexity of the search. So basically, the more information you specify, the narrower the search will apply to, I guess. That was a very bad way of putting it, but it makes sense, right? If you specify your house number, your street, and your city, and your zip code, it's pretty easy to find versus if you just specify your house number, and that's hard to find. You need to search a lot bigger space. Okay, I should just stop talking. Anyway, we have that functionality implemented. The next step would be to insert the JSON results here. No, not there. Here. So whenever we click this button, we want to insert a couple properties here. I also thought it was funny that license here was misspelled. So we want to insert the display name. So let's look at our request in Postman. Since it's prettier, it's easier to look at and understand. So there's a features. So inside our object, there's a features array. And then the features is what we want to loop over. Okay, so let's go ahead and open this and configure events. Go back here. So if the request was successful, if we got a 200 return, then we don't want to print this anymore. It's just redundant information at this point. Okay, what we do want is to loop over the requests. So res.json, and then what was the key? Features. Features here for result in. This is a list. We want to ls.append, and we want to append something. What is ls? Well, that's a list I'm about to create. So this will hold basically our options, or we can call it options. I usually just use ls, and it should be a list. I don't know why I used options. We're going to append. Let's look at our drop-down options. So there's nothing in here yet, but it's just a list, and it has a label and a value. This value can actually be, so let's change this to an object. It can actually be an object itself. So then we can have latitude and longitude key value pairs, LNG. There we go. Like this, and the display name can be the display name, and then when we hit play, we have our value. So it's displayed as the label is displayed, but the actual value that underlies it is this object here. Okay, so that's basically what we want to do. Let's remove this. It'll be overwritten anyway. and go back to our event. Okay, options.append, we want to append an object, right, with a label. We'll insert that right now, and then a value will be another object, and this will have latitude and longitude key value pairs. So let's go ahead and take a look at, so result will hold each of these objects. So this will be result, and then the next iteration of the loop, this will be result. That makes sense. So result, display name, result properties display name. We'll have our display name, we'll have our label. I don't know why I can't seem to clear my throat. So like this, result properties display name. We'll hold this, and then our latitude and longitude will come from a different property. Let's go ahead and look at that. Okay, so we're going to use features. This will be our list, and then the actual object that is being iterated will be this one. So it'll be result, geometry, coordinates. So result, oops, what am I doing? So result, geometry, coordinates, and then this will be LNG or lat. Well, actually, it doesn't specify which one is which. Okay, so we'll leave it like that for now. And let's just copy this. And paste that in there. Okay. Okay, and then the last thing we want to do is we want to actually bind our drop-down options. Or not bind it, but set our options list. Or set the drop-down options equal to our options list. Okay, let's go ahead and click OK. Save this. Let's go back into our session, update, close this. So if we hit search for New York, we should, oh, there we go. We have options for New York. That's kind of slow because there is an HTTP request being made. So if we go Seattle, search, you'll see that there's apparently a Seattle in Mexico. I didn't know that. But you'll see all the options here, even one in a language I can't understand. Okay, so that is the functionality we want. The last thing we want to do is when we click on one of these options, we want it to fly to that location on the map. So we're almost done with this project. Let's actually go to, so let's go to Folsom and click here. Let's click here, Blue Ravine Road. So longitude is the one with the negative value, so I'm going to assume that here the first one is longitude and this one is latitude. So coordinates is a list. The first element is longitude. So let's go back to our button. Oops. Event. So longitude will be the first one. First element 0, and then latitude will be the second one. Let's hit OK, and then let's add a script here on the drop down. So on action performed. We want to do a script. We want to do self dot props dot value, I believe. Yeah, dot value. Self dot props dot value. Self dot props dot value, and then we want to get our map. Map here. So map, and then there's a function fly to. So where I'm getting this is the documentation on the map component. So this man, I don't know his first name, posted when the perspective map component was first created. He posted this documentation, and there's a function here called fly to, and there's an object lat capital LNG. So that is what we'll call it. So lat LNG will equal this object here. Lat is equal to something, and then LNG is equal to something, and those somethings will be a number and a number. And then we can also set a zoom level and different options. But what is required is the latitude and longitude of the location we are flying to. So of course, at this point we know coordinates has a latitude position. So coordinates has a lat key and also a longitude key. And then we can set the zoom level here. So forgot, is it zoom? Zoom is equal to, let's just set it to 10. And then zoom, we can set it to 10 and see how this looks like. Okay, so let me remove New York from this text field and remove the options. Search, there we go. Save this, go back into the session. Let's try this again. So let's type in New York, search. Let's click on the option and let's see if it'll take us to New York. There we go. So I think we have our longitude and latitude correct. Let's search for Seattle. King County. I like the zoom level 10. So I think I'll keep it like that. Okay. That is pretty much what you saw there in the intro. And that is the functionality that I decided to build out. So there are many different improvements to this project you can do. I don't particularly like how you have to click search for these options to be populated, but I also don't like a request being sent every time a character is updated. So for example, every time. So let me actually show you what I'm talking about here. What we could do is bind the onSelect here. We could do our HTTP query here and then go to the text field, turn off these properties, defer updates, and reject updates while focused. Turn these off, and then every time a character changes, it'll run a query. So as we're typing in Seattle, we can put in the capital S, but then the search space is very large, so it might freeze up the UI. That's why I decided to do more of an event-driven design, more of a traditional like button click design. So that's not the cleanest UI, but hopefully this will help. This will help these forum users, whoever wants to implement this sort of feature. It was fun playing around with the map component. I haven't really used it in any of the projects I've built. They've mostly been built for one location. Nothing's really been, across geographical regions. But that is about all I wanted to show you today. I'll try to be posting more consistently. I just had quite the weekend. So that is why I haven't had a video for over a week. But anyway, thank you guys for watching, and thank you for continuing to support my channel and for being a part of the Discord. Much appreciated. I will see you in the next video though.